What's up, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another fiber format video, and this is going to be one of my last fiber format videos because we've sort of reached the end of the sort of jank exploration that I can do. Sure, I could revisit older jank decks and see how they're doing in this format, but I think, frankly, they're not the best, and I sort of value exploring the new sort of options that are available in a given format. And this video covers the last real major one of those. And it's one that I've been sort of planning for a while because I've mentioned in the past how Legacy of Darkness, which is the new set that Fiber Format introduces, sort of introduces three sort of distinct archetypes. And those are warriors, fiends, and dragons. Now, I've covered warriors in Gearfried. I've covered fiends in the fiend video. And lastly, there's dragons. Now, dragons is a bit tricky because I think it's easily the worst of the three types introduced. It's got a very sort of interesting sort of thing going on where it clearly wants you to tribute and discard your dragons, using things like just tribute monsters like Yamata Dragon or Tyrant Dragon, and monsters like Spirit Ryu and Grey Wing to just discard cards, and then to like plus off them with things like Super Rejuvenation, which can then let you draw cards equal to the number of dragons that you've tributed or discarded this turn. The flaw with this is, unless you're activating multiple super rejuvenations in a turn, this doesn't really net you advantage. It's just replacing what you've lost. And so it's like kind of a deep draw deck without really much advantage gaining, like a mass control deck, and nothing to really draw into if you play dragons on its own. So I saw a deep draw deck, and I was thinking, what can we actually draw into here? As in these early formats, just drawing for the sake of drawing isn't necessarily the best. And one combo came to mind, and that is Exodia. So I decided to combine dragons and Exodias together in a deck that I like to call Dragons, because, drawing cards. I think it's funny. But I think that this deck is sort of very interesting, and it actually did a little bit better than I expected. And I do think that it's at least more interesting cover than the standard sort of beatdown deck with dragons, which I really don't think is the best, as it's just kind of bleeding advantage all the time and drawing into some pretty suboptimal cards. So I do prefer this version of dragons personally. But if you do want to play a deck with like Tyrant Dragon, Spear Dragon, Grey Wing, etc., then you can definitely do that. It's just I won't be covering it on the channel unless people really, really want me to. But now that I've sort of gotten this introduction out of the way, let's dive into the card by card so I can explain exactly how this deck ticks, because it does look fairly different from a regular deck. The monster lineup is pretty much completely different. Of course, we've got the 5 pieces of Exodia here, which is our win condition, and we've also got a Sangan and a Witch to help search them out. Now, in a typical Exodia deck, you'd also be playing Mystic Tomatoes to easily get into your Sangans and Witches and easily add a piece to hand. But frankly, I didn't have the space for them, and given that we're just trying to draw as many cards as possible, I was worried that drawing multiple tomatoes would be kind of bad because it could clog up your hand a little bit. It could indeed potentially get out, 2 different recruiters if you got 2 different tomatoes. But I feel like if you then draw into your recruiters, then the tomatoes are kind of dead. So I didn't really feel like that was worth it. And I do actually have another card in here to potentially preserve some of that field presence instead. So what we've got here, besides these, sort of standard cards, is just all dragons. And to start with, we've got Spirit Ryu, which is a level 4 monster that you'd see in the Dragon Beatdown decks, but we are playing it here because it's good at potentially getting discard cards for our Super Rejuvenations. So this is a monster with 1,000 attack that says, during your battle step, if this card battles, quick effect, you can discard 1 dragon monster to your graveyard. This card gains 1,000 attack and defense until the end of the battle phase. And as a note, this is not once per turn, so you can do this multiple times in the battle step. Buff this up to an absurd amount of attack points if you do have a bunch of dragons in hand. And this would kind of be like the typical win condition for a dragon beatdown deck. It's just a bit harder to pull off, I think, than people might expect. So here we're just kind of using this as like, if we need a beater or a card to get rid of something like a Jinzo, then this card can do it if you've got enough dragons in hand. But mainly, if we've got Super Rejuvenations and we've got a bunch of dragons in hand, we can bring this out, attack in, discard all our dragons, then Super Rejuvenation to basically cycle through our deck more and potentially draw into some more pieces. We've also got Troop Dragons. These are good at just preserving field presence, as when they're destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you have to special summon another Troop Dragon from your deck. Now, I do think that this isn't necessarily as good as a Mystic Tomato because you're not getting powerful monsters, you're just getting more of itself. But it is another dragon, so, you're filling up your dragon core for your Super Rejuvenation, so I do think it's good in that respect. We've also got a Twin-Headed Behemoth. I'm a little bit iffy on this card, but basically this also preserves field presence, and it can be used as tribute fodder, because this says during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it's destroyed on field and sent there this turn, you can special summon this card, but its attack and defense become 1000. You can only use the effect of Twin-Headed Behemoth once per duel. So, this card won't get more value after like a Fiber Jar has been activated, and it isn't really even getting much value as it is. It can be brought back as a tribute for Yamata Dragon, which is kind of nice. But yeah, it's honestly in here because it's just like not a bad card. It's another dragon, and it does preserve field presence. So it's not the worst thing in the world, so we are playing it. We've also got 2 Yamata Dragon, which may seem weird, as this is a very tricky card to play with. It can't be special summoned, and it has to return to the owner's hand during the end phase of the turn normal. It flips face up, but when it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you draw cards until you have 5 cards in hand. So this card can be good at just filling up your hand with a ton of cards, potentially drawing into more pieces for Exodia. And also, if you tribute 2 dragons to bring it out, you do get to use Super Rejuvenation in the end phase. So if you do actually manage to pull off a Yamata Dragon combo, then you can draw a ton of cards and potentially just draw into Exodia just like that. So we are playing 2 of this, as we do want to see it. There's no way to search it. I was thinking about playing 3, and you could potentially replace a Twin and Behemoth for it, but it is very tough to actually bring out. So it's a bit risky in that way, and so that's why we're only playing 2. You could maybe cut this down to 1, but I do think it's important enough to want to see more than 1 of it. And lastly, this may seem like a weird choice, but you are playing the Dragon Dwelling in the Cave. This is a normal monster with 1300 attack and 2000 defense, and this may seem really weird, as, there are cards in this form that can beat over it. Check Fairly can get over it, although that'll cost your opponent a lot of life points. Bazoo the Soul Eater can get over it. There's things that can deal with this thing. However, it is a normal monster, so it can pair with Backup Soldier very well, getting a little more pseudo advantage to potentially act as discard fodder for things like Spirit Ryu or Graceful Charity to then fuel your Super Rejuvenations. So I do like it in that respect. And if your opponent doesn't have a way to get over this, it can be really annoying for them to deal with. So I do like it in this deck. For these spells, we've got a lot of power spells here, although not all the power spells, as, again, deck space is kind of tight, and we just want the things that will help our game plan the most. We've got Dark Hole, 2 Graceful Charity, Monster Reborn to mainly bring back recruiters like Sangan and Witch, 3 MST, and this may seem a little bit weird, but the reason we have this is because Imperial Order just shuts this deck down, so we really do need a way to deal with Imperial Order. Painful Choice, this can send 3 of your normal Exodia pieces to graveyard to get back off of Backup Soldier, which can just win you the game. We've got Pot of Greed, Raigeki, 3 Super Rejuvenation. This card is a bit bad, I will be honest, but, I do think that it is what we're going for in this deck, and you need to play enough of it to draw into it so you can use multiple of it in one turn. So I do think that it's not bad here, and it kind of is the backbone of our deck, so we do have to play 3 of it. And lastly, an Upstart Goblin. For the traps, we've got 2 Backup Soldier, a Call of the Haunted to bring back a Recruiter. We've got Imperial Order and 3 Jar of Greed. We could also potentially play a Premature Burial to bring back a Sangan or a Witch as well, but that costs life points, and, it can be stopped preemptively by more things than, like, Reborn and Call of the Haunted, so I'm not playing it. You could definitely play it in your deck if you wanted. The side deck is kind of a hodgepodge, mainly just to experiment with, but honestly, there are too many cards in this deck to actually fully side out of the Exodia strategy, or at least the deep draw Exodia strategy. Like, you could side out the 5 pieces and the backup soldiers, that's 7, but then if you wanted to go like full dragon beatdown, you'd have to also side out the troop dragons and the dragons dwelling in the cave. You'd probably want to side out some Jars of Greed and the Upstart, and by this point, there are just too many cards to side out that you won't be able to do the full smoke screen. So we've just got a bit of experimental cards here just to try and fine-tune the deck. We've got 3 Tomatoes just in case those are a good inclusion in the deck. We've got 3 Magician of Faith, as being able to recycle things like Super Rejuvenation or Graceful Charity can be very good. We've got Triple Scapegoat, as these can be good at stopping offensive pressure. 3 Cheerful Coffin, this is honestly, or 2 Cheerful Coffin, but this is honestly just a meme. Like, this is honestly just side deck filler, but it does let you discard dragons to the graveyard to fuel your Super Rejuvenations. Really, really bad combo, but, you know, it is kind of a funny thing you can do. And lastly, for the traps, we got a Mirror Force and triple Torrential Tribute if you do need more defensive pressure here. The fusion deck doesn't really matter, although we did try and put in more dragons or dragon-related cards than we normally would. And that's going to be the deck. I think this deck is really neat. I don't necessarily think it's the best deck out there, but it is really fun to play. So let's dive into some games and see how it does. Okay, we've got our first game against Dump Truck. Frequent guests on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. They've been really active in Fiber format, and they're part of the people that give me hope that Fiber format won't die after I'm done covering it, because there are a fair amount of people that really are passionate about this format and really want to keep exploring it and see what's out there. So they will win the die roll here, and, you know, that's kind of unfortunate, but our hand isn't the best, so it's not the worst thing in the world until they fire Confiscation. That's pretty bad. Firstly, they know that we're on dragons now with the amount of dragons, although, you know, they don't know exactly what type of dragons we're on, so, you know, they might not be prepared for Exodia, but they will be able to hit the Sangan out of our hand, which is really brutal, as we really did want the Sangan there. But they will take that out of our hand here. Set one, pass back to us. We draw a Monster Reborn, which is pretty good. We'll be able to bring back that Sangan, and we could potentially bring it back. We misclicked playing the MST. We didn't want to do that. We just wanted to set the jar. But yeah, we're eventually not going to go for the Sangan. The punish here is if they've got like a Magician of Faith set, they can get back the Confi, hit our Monster Reborn, and that'd be pretty bad for us. But they can still profit off of the confiscation either way if we bring Sangan out, because they can just take whatever we search, and we'll have used the Monster Reborn anyways. So I think it's ultimately fine here that we just save the Monster Reborn. They're going to go for a painful choice here, and that is fine by us. They're going to send a bunch of cards here, but since we see the Serpent, we're just going to give them the Serpent, because why not? I mean, they're going to get it back eventually anyways. We don't have Kaiku to remove it from the grave, so it just makes sense to give them that. They're going to flip up this giant rat here, and they're going to bring out a Sangan on top of it. So they'll be able to get in for 2,400, which is a little bit unfortunate. But not really anything we could do there. They're just going to pass back to us. We draw another Jar of Greed. I'm just going to fire the Jar of Greed we have set, because we really need something that can stop this offensive pressure here. And Dragon Dwelling in the Cave can do that. So we'll set that. Set this Jar of Greed, pass back to them. Next turn, we can potentially reborn back our Sangan, tribute out a Yamada Dragon, and attack in. Get in some damage that way, which would be pretty good. They're going to hit in to our Dragon Dwelling in the Cave here. Take 600, switch that Sangan into defense, and fire a Forceful Sentry, sending back the Reborn here. That's very unfortunate. We won't be able to pull off our Yamada Dragon play here. But we'll shuffle our deck a couple times, and we draw the Reborn. And I did check the log. We did indeed shuffle the deck. See, shuffle deck, shuffle deck. You know, we shuffled it a couple times. But that can occasionally happen here. So it happened here, and we are just going to go for it, because, you know, we kind of want to get drawing. It's maybe a bit greedy, but I figure they likely have a way to deal with the Dragon Dwelling in the Deep here. And yeah, we're just going to go for the Yamada Dragon. Search out a piece of Exodia here. Set this MST and hit in to the Giant Rat just to deal some damage. They will be able to get out Injection Fairy Lily, which is a bit unfortunate. We don't have a way to stop that, but we're not dead to Lily. We are likely dead soon, but we could potentially draw a way to deal with that. Super Rejuvenation won't quite be a way to deal with that, but we can activate that to draw a card at least, which won't be bad. We also have this Jar of Greed here, and Imperial Order ain't bad. We're going to go for the Super Rejuvenation now. End phase, Yamada Dragon will return to hand. We tributed one dragon, so we'll get this Graceful Charity to hand, and Graceful Charity can be pretty good here. They're going to switch the Sangan to attack, and we're surprisingly not dead. Okay, we'll take it. We'll take it. So they're going to pay 3,400 off the Lily. Drop us down to 1,200. We're in a very dangerous spot, but they're just going to set one, pass back to us, and we're just going to Graceful Charity here. Draw 3. We're going to think about what to discard. I think we do just discard the amount of dragons, as they will not be useful at this point in the game. We're going to go for a Raigeki here, clearing their board. They will get a search off that. They're just going to search out a Witch. And we're just going to set this Troop Dragon, set a Call of the Haunted, pass back to them. And let's see what they do here. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato, and they're going to fire a Raigeki. Now, we could potentially stop this with Imperial Order, but I actually want to save the Imperial Order for other spells here. We're not dead at this point, because we do have Call of the Haunted to bring back Sangan. Sangan can search us out a last piece here, or not a last piece, but a fourth piece. And so I feel like we should probably save the Imperial Order for something later. So we are indeed going to fire the Call of the Haunted now, bring back this Sangan here. And they're going to think about what actually to attack this in, because, you know, we could potentially have 4 pieces in hand. Luckily for them, we don't. So we're just going to add another piece to hand. And we just kind of got to hope at this point. We draw Spirit Ryu, which isn't quite the best here. So we're just going to set this Dragon Dwelling in the cave, hope that that's enough. And our opponent's going to go for a change of heart. We've got the IO, but they don't have the MST, so that's really good for us. They're just going to set one, pass back to us. We draw Painful Choice, and this is a very, very important decision here. We could potentially keep the Imperial Order up just to preserve our Dragon Dwelling in the cave. But if they've got something like Jinzo to bring out next turn to hit over the Dragon Dwelling in the cave, then we just lose the game at that point. And also, Painful Choice could potentially get us into something that could win us the game this turn if we're able to get another piece to hand. So it is a tough decision, but I do eventually decide to just let the Imperial Order go. And I am just going to fire a Painful Choice here, sending a bunch of draw spells, a Witch of Black Forest, and unfortunately I didn't remember exactly what was in my deck, and unfortunately there is no other like sort of last draw spell, so I do just send this Dark Hole here, which is unfortunate, but Dark Hole wouldn't be terrible to get. We'd clear our own monster, but we'd also clear both of those. If they had a Witch set, we'd still have the Spirit Ryu to set next turn, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I do think that this was kind of an unfortunate case where we didn't have a fifth good card to send here. Luckily for us, our opponent does give us the Upstart Goblin, so we will be able to potentially draw into more stuff here. So we're going to go for that Upstart. They'll gain 1,000. We draw Troop Dragon, which isn't bad. I believe, yeah, we still have one Troop Dragon left in deck, so this can help us deck thin a little bit, as long as they don't have like mass board removal, and the Raigeki is gone, so unless they've got a Magician of Faith set or they hard draw a Dark Hole, I feel pretty good about this. Unfortunately, they do have the Dark Hole there, so they will be able to clear our board, and they did set the Witch, so that will indeed be the end of the game. They're going to Graceful Charity. I mean, I'm just going to end the suspense. I don't have anything to stop that rat, so it doesn't actually matter here. So that was a pretty interesting game one. We almost managed to assemble Exodia. We were only one piece off. So I felt pretty good about that, honestly. I mean, it wasn't good enough to win, obviously, but still not bad. I think for game 2, I saw that they were on Giant Rat and Mystic Tomato, so I actually do side out the Yamada Dragons and bring in Scapegoats. Because the Yamada Dragon's really bad against the Recruiters, because if you attack him with the Yamada Dragon, as we saw that game, your opponent can get out like Injection Fairy Lily and get in for a ton of damage, so I feel like they're a bit less good in this matchup here. So I do side those out, bring in Scapegoats instead, and let's see how that does for us. This is a great opener here, honestly. I'm just going to set a Troop Dragon, set a Jar of Greed, and pass. You might wonder why I'm not going for the Graceful Charity now, and the reason for this is I want to save Graceful Charity for when I have a Super Rejuvenation in hand. Maybe a bit greedy, but I think you kind of do have to do that sort of thing in this deck, and unfortunately our opponent does have no moment for the Troop Dragon here. It really stinks, and they've got a Graceful Charity on top of that, so they'll be able to draw 3 here, discard 2, and bring out a Witch of the Black Forest. Quite unfortunate. They're going to attack in for 1,100. We will take that 11. And main 2, they're just going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw another Jar of Greed. We're going to fire this Jar of Greed, draw 1. Imperial Order is pretty great. We'll set this Sangan, set Jar of Greed, and set Imperial Order, pass back to them. And unfortunately, they hit the Imperial Order. That is very unfortunate. You know, they had a choice of 2 back row. They hit the one that is much more powerful, but hopefully it won't matter. Unfortunately, they've got Change of Heart, so that might make it matter a little bit. They're going to tribute that off for a Jinzo, so actually it wouldn't have really mattered because they could have just tributed over their Witch, Change of Heart, then being safe from IO. So yeah, it's not that big of a deal actually, but they're going to go for a Painful Choice here on top of that, sending 5, and normally I just give my opponent Serpent, but in case they just, have a graceful this turn that they might fire and go for game, I'm just going to give them the Scapegoat. Scapegoat is going to be pretty useless for them. We're not attacking. So, yeah, and they can't even use it right now because they've got 2 monsters on field. So, yeah, I feel fine giving them the Scapegoat. I don't really think that matters. And we draw Troop Dragon, which is okay. We're going to go for Graceful here as we just really do need to draw something out this board. And, well, that isn't something out of the board, but it's not bad. We're going to set a Troop Dragon, set a Scapegoat, pass back to our opponent. The reason we sent the 2 Dragon Dwelling in the Deep is because, Jinzo can get over them, and we also got Backup Soldier later to recycle them. So our opponent's going to draw here, go for Exiled, which is very unfortunate. They'll be able to clear our Troop Dragon there, and they'll be able to get in for 3,500, or they would be able to if we didn't have this Scapegoat. So the Scapegoat is kind of coming in clutch here, and they'll attack into 2 of our tokens here. and then set one, pass back to us. We draw Mystical Space Typhoon, which we're just going to set and pass back to them. They're going to add that Serpent back to hand, which will be able to clear a token, unfortunately. But it looks like they're going to bring out this Sangan instead. Hit in to our tokens here, clear both of them, and get in for 2,400. It's not looking good here. They're just going to pass back to us. And Graceful Charity, this is our last hope. We're going to fire that, draw 3, and that will not do it. We're just going to set this Witch, pass back to them, but the writing's on the wall. They just need to attack in, and it looks like they are indeed just going to attack in, and that will be the end of the game. So Jinzo kind of shut us down a little bit here, but honestly, we were kind of just dead in this game from the start. Nothing we could really do here. But that's how some of the games with this deck do go. It's very, very jank, and occasionally things won't work out for you. So, I don't think that this deck is going to be tier 1 or meta by any stretch of the imagination. But as game 1 showed, it can get pretty close to Exodia in some cases, and it can be pretty fun to play as well. Given that this deck is so fun to play, this wasn't the only game that I played with it, so I actually do have another game to show off here. So let's dive into that now and see what else this deck can do. Okay, we've got a game here against Zawarudo, Dark Arm God, who has appeared on the channel in the past for Fiber format. Always a pleasure to have them on. We are again playing that Dragon Exodia deck. Let's see if we can do a little bit better this game than we did in the first game here. The hand is not the most promising, but you never know. They're just going to set 2 pass, and that is actually pretty promising. Now, we could potentially go for a greedy play here, summoning out Spirit Ryu, and just attacking in, discarding our hand here, going for Super Rejuvenation. I think that's a little bit too greedy, so I'm just going to set the Troop Dragon, set HR Greed, pass back to them, and see what they do. They're going to bring out an Exiled Force and just tribute it off to get rid of our set, which is very unfortunate. So we would have liked to preserve that Troop Dragon a bit. We draw a right leg of the Forbidden One, which is okay. We're going to go for a Jar of Greed, though, just to see what we get. And that is really good. We've got the Graceful Charity Super Rejuvenation combo, so I feel very good about this. We're going to draw 3, send those 2 there. Go for a painful choice before going for the Super Rejuvenation, sending our 3 Exodia pieces and 2 more Super Rejuvenations, because if they give us those Super Rejuvenations, we get to draw a lot more. If they give us an Exodia piece, we're fine with that as well. We can still bring them back off of Backup Soldier. So we feel very good about this, and we could potentially win the game. They're going to give us a Super Rejuvenation indeed, and we feel very good about that. We're just going to start setting our hand, and unfortunately they just blind snipe the first card we set here, which... I mean, maybe we should have set this in a different order, but I didn't think they were just going to blind swipe on the first set. But unfortunately, they do get rewarded for that. It's a Backup Soldier, so kind of unfortunate we won't be able to win the game this turn. But we draw the head, so if they hadn't blind sniped the Backup Soldier and instead hit one of our other sets, we would have actually won the game here. So I think that does show that this deck can actually pull off the Exodia combo. But kind of unfortunate. We're in a tough spot. We can still potentially draw into our other Backup Soldiers. So and we're definitely not dead. It's just a little bit unfortunate. We draw Raigeki. Not the best here. We draw Greed and draw Dark Hole. So we're just going to fire that Dark Hole. They'll lose that monster. We'll set a Call of the Haunted, pass back to them. We want to sort of bait out more spell and trap removal in case we do draw into our Backup Soldier later. They're going to go for a Pot of Greed here, drawing 2. And unfortunately, they do have the confiscation, so very rough. They'll take the head, and now we really can't win through Exodia unless they're playing a Fiber Jar, and we're able to trigger that Fiber Jar. But yeah, very, very rough here. But still, even if we can't win through Exodia, there's still a chance that we'll win the game. Not much of a chance, but it's there. So, we're just going to keep it in the game until the game's over. They're going to go for a Delinquent Duo here, and they're going to hit 2 cards out of our hand. They're going to grab the piece, which we are going to discard anyways, and we're just going to discard this MST. We've got an MST set already, so we don't need the other, really. They're going to banish 1 for an Aqua Spirit here. Then they're going to bring out Injection Fairy Lily and get in for a ton of damage here. So the Injection Fairy Lily is going to hit in for 3,400, and they're going to attack in with an Aqua Spirit here. And now we actually have a very interesting choice, as looking at their life points and looking at our hand, I think we actually may be able to win here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire the Call of the Haunted on the Aqua Spirit attack. And I'm actually going to bring back a Dragon Dwelling in the Cave. And this may seem like a really weird play, but this does block damage and keep us over 2,000 life points. And that is going to be essential for my plan here. So they're going to hit into the Dragon Dwelling in the Cave. That will deal 300 to us. So we're still at 2,500. And in the end phase, we're just going to fire an MST in case they've got like a scapegoat set or something. It's a torrential tribute, so that's still pretty good to hit in the end phase. And we draw Dragon Dwelling in the Deep, which is what we needed to actually win the game here. We just needed a monster with 600 more attack because we can ride Geki, their board, Monster Reborn back their Injection Fairy Lily. And since we are at over 2,000 life points, we can indeed pay for its effect, and that will indeed be over 4,000 damage. So that is the end of the game. So I think that was a really great showing for the deck. I mean, our opponent's playing like a water deck, so maybe not the most meta thing in the world. But this does show that this deck can win against other jank decks. And, you know, if our opponent hadn't hit the backup soldier with the blind MST snipe, we would have won through Exodia that turn that we set it. So I feel pretty good about this deck potentially being able to get into the Exodia pieces. Unfortunately for games 2 and 3, it becomes much more of an uphill battle for this deck as our opponent does have ways to side into anti-Exodia hate. So they are going to go first, and this is not the worst hand in the world. Our opponent's going to fire a Delinquent Duo here and hit 2 cards out of her hand. They're going to hit the Jar of Greed, which honestly is probably one of the better cards to hit. And we're just going to send this piece because, you know, we can get it back off of a backup soldier later. Opponent's going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Dragon Dwelling in the Cave. Not bad. We'll just set that, set a Call the Haunted, pass back to them. Again, we're trying to bait out spell and trap removal. And they're just going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw an MST here, and, you know, I'm just fine setting that MST, passing back to them. We could have potentially set the Monster Reborn to play around the possibility that they've got a Magician of Faith set, but, you know, if they've got a Magician of Faith set, I mean, it's fine. They can get back the Duo and snipe our hand. I mean, the Reborn doesn't really have much value at this point in the game, so I feel fine about this. It's kind of unfortunate that it is what they do. And then they're going to tribute out a Dark Ruler Hades, which is really problematic for this deck, as this deck really does need things like Troop Dragon, Sangan, which with Black Forest to actually go off. So kind of unfortunate, and well, that's the end of the Exodia dream here. They'll be able to banish our entire graveyard with Soul Release, and that includes an Exodia piece, so we won't be able to get that back. Troop Dragon is not helpful here. I mean, we'll set it as a sort of chump blocker, but it is what it is. They're going to go for a Premature Burial here. We could MST this. Even though it's kind of weird, they're bringing out Magician of Faith. So I think we probably should MST this, but I'm saving the MST for something better later. And unfortunately, they do indeed bring out a Jinzo off this, which is kind of like the Telegraph play there. But I figured that, you know, it couldn't hurt to save the MST for later, but I was wrong there. We were kind of in a losing spot anyways, and we're just going to set 1, pass back to them. I think even if they hadn't brought out the Jinzo, I think we'd still be dead here, as, you know, that's 3,400 plus 2,450, so that is enough to kill us. So I don't think that the MSTing the Premature Burial actually did matter in the end, but I think it probably would have been the better thing to do just in case. But anyways, that's going to be game 2. Very, very quick game 2, and it does show how much this deck can struggle if our opponent actually does have, you know, sort of hate against it, which our opponent brought in Soul Releases, so they are packing hate for the Exodia deck. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the deck breakdown, the deck can't really side into a smokescreen strategy. It just kind of does have to commit to Exodia a bit more. So we're just going to go into this game 3 playing pretty much the same thing. I don't really think we make many changes here. But this is a pretty great hand. We draw Graceful Charity and Super Rejuvenation in the opener along with Imperial Order. I mean, this is just killer. We're going to draw 3, and then we're going to pitch this Yamato Dragon and Spirit Ryu. Fire a Painful Choice here, and we're going to send the 3 normal Exodia pieces plus 2 Super Rejuvenations. Such a powerful combo in this deck. We'll grab that Super Rejuvenation, and now we get to draw 4 in the end phase here. We're going to set a Troop Dragon, Call of the Haunted, and Imperial Order, and then go for double Super Rejuve to draw 4 here. So in the end phase, we'll draw those 4. And, I mean, not the worst 4, but also not the best. They're just going to blind snipe one of our back row with the MST. We could potentially Imperial Order this, but I want to save the Imperial Order for something a bit better. They're going to go for a Nobleman on the Troop Dragon. And again, I want to save the Imperial Order for something a bit better. Something like a Soul Release or something that can actually really influence the game. And also, I also want to actually let my powerful spells go through here. So yeah, I just keep the order set. Maybe this was a mistake, but I feel ultimately okay about it. We're going to go for an Upstart Goblin, draw 1, buff up their life points by 1,000, then fire a Dark Hole just in case that sets something nasty. And it was something nasty. It was a Fiber Jar, so I feel good about going for that. We're then going to set this Dragon Dwelling in the Cave and a Jar of Greed pass back to our opponent. Let's see what they do here. They're going to bring out an Exiled Forest, tribute that off, and hit our set. that's fine. I mean, it's Dragon Dwelling in the Cave, so not much, to worry about there. We're going to draw our greed to draw another. We draw Stangan, which is honestly not bad. We'll just bring that out, hit in for 1,000 there. And main two, we're just going to set one, pass back to our opponent. Opponent's just going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Right Arm of the Forbidden One, and I don't really feel the need to commit anything to board, as, saying game beats is fine enough, and if they've got Torrential, I don't really want to play into that. So we're just going to attack in for 1,000, and they're going to go for Forceful Sentry. We do actually let that go through. We could potentially have fired the Imperial Order there, but I figure, we've got Sangan to search out another piece anyways, so it doesn't really matter that much if they forceful back a piece here. And yeah, the other cards in hand are good, but I don't really feel like, I mean, the Raigeki would be a pain to lose, but I don't really feel like we need the Raigeki at this point in the game, because we do have Dragon Dwelling in the Cave, which can be an annoying wall. And yeah, so I feel ultimately fine about this. They're just going to pass back to us. We draw Yamata Dragon, which is pretty nice. We're going to attack in for 1,000 here. And then main two, we're just going to set a Dragon Dwelling in the Cave, because this could potentially be fuel for Yamata Dragon next turn. So our opponent's going to bring out Injection Fairy Lily, and they're going to attack in to our Sangan here, paying 2,000. We take 2,400 off that, but we will be able to search out that piece that got shuffled back into the deck there. And then they're just going to pass back to us. We draw another Dragon Dwelling in the Cave here. We're going to set that pass back to them. If they want to keep attacking him with Lily, they'll have to cut down their life points even more here. They're going to set one, switch the Lily to defense, and pass back to us. And I actually do think that we could potentially win here, because we fire MST on their back row, Raigeki their board next turn, bring it Spirit Ryu. Spirit Ryu can get up to 2,000 by pitching the Yamata Dragon, and our Dragon Dwelling in the Cave can be 2,600. So I feel like this is probably the best way to go. I don't actually think I see this line, though, in the moment. I just go for the greedy play of tributing both Dragon Dwelling in the Cave for Yamata Dragon. I should have just gone for the Spirit Ryu play that I mentioned. That would have actually won us the game this turn. But I got greedy. I saw Yamata Dragon and I tunneled in on it. So unfortunately, we don't win the game this turn, but we are in a pretty good spot with them only at 1,400 life points left. We're going to set MST and this Jar of Greed here. End phase, Yamata Dragon will return to hand, and we'll pass back to them. They're just going to set one and banish one for an Aqua Spirit here. And then they're going to fire a Legendary Ocean, attack in for 1,800, because their monster is buffed by 200 from a Legendary Ocean. And they're just going to pass back to us. In the end phase, we are going to go for a Mystical Space Typhoon here. And they've got Imperial Order, and they're actually not going to chain that. I think that's fine. I mean, either way, we win the game here. If they do chain Imperial Order, then their monster's down to 1,600. We bring out Spirit Ryu, buff its attack up to 3,000 next turn, and hit into Aqua Spirit for 1,400. If they don't, then, we've got Imperial Order of our own that can do the same thing. So it ultimately doesn't matter here. And we draw another dragon on top of that. We're going to Jar of Greed to draw another dragon just to see how high we can buff the Spirit Ryu. And with that Spirit Ryu effect, we're going to just, basically OTK them here through that Aqua Spirit. And that will indeed be the end of the game here. So an exciting way to end the game. And, again, as I mentioned, we could have gone for a game a bit earlier in this duel, but I didn't quite see it. But it does show that this deck does have the capability to get aggressive if your opponent does get rid of your Exodia combo. Now here, we didn't actually have our Exodia combo shut off. There were actually a couple things that could have won us the game here if we drew Backup Soldier. That would have been really good. We still have Pot of Greed left in deck. So, there were a lot of things here that we could have drawn that could have actually enabled us to win through Exodia, and I did think that that was a very likely outcome. However, in this situation, since we could go for game, we just did, and we could have actually gone for game even earlier than this. So I think that this shows that this deck is a very good rogue contender. I can beat a lot of other jank in this format, and it's a blast to play. Like, I had a lot of fun playing these games. It is just very, sort of high rolly, and if you play this deck, you got to be prepared for disappointment, because this deck does feel like really underpowered when you're playing it. You're kind of like on the edge of your seat, like, will I draw what I need, or will I draw Yamata Dragon as brick? But when you actually get to pull off the big drawing plays, it just feels so cool, even if you're not actually, using those drawing plays for much interesting stuff. But let me know what you think about this deck down below. I think it's really cool, but, it definitely is pretty bad as well. So, I can definitely see people in the comments saying, this deck is trash. It's probably not even rogue. It's trash here. Or I can also see people in the comments saying, this deck actually deserves to be tier 2. Maybe with a bit of adjustments, it can get really, really good. And Dragon Exodia could be a major contender in this format. who knows? I look forward to discussing with you all in the comments below as always. Also, if you do enjoy this sort of content, please be sure to subscribe. We're at over 760 right now, which is really awesome to see. I'd really like to reach 800 by the end of the month. And I will have a 750 subscriber special coming sometime soon. Unfortunately, I've had some other videos that have taken up my attention beforehand, but the 750 subscriber special should be coming, and it should be a lot of fun. So I hope that you do enjoy it. But this will be the last of my regular coverage of Fiber format. If you did enjoy the format, please be sure to go to the Yu-Gi-Oh from Zero Discord. Link to the description down below. It's a great place to play games in this format, as well as any other format that I cover on this channel. But I really like to keep this format alive, as I think it's really, really fun, and there's a lot of depth that has not been explored yet. So I encourage you all to go over there and check it out. Now, I did say that this was my last Fiber format video, but I do have one sneaky sort of video coming out in Fiber format, which was actually a request of the winner of the latest Yu-Gi-Oh from Zero monthly tournament that we held in the Discord. And yeah, as a prize, you get to request a video, and they requested another Fiber format video. So that should be a lot of fun. Look forward to that coming out pretty soon. But besides that, that's the end of my Fiber format coverage. And I'll be happy to dive into, LOD format very briefly, and then into Yata, which I know a lot of people have been really looking forward to. So I hope that you all join me on that journey. But until next time, I've been Ben from Yu-Gi-Oh from Zero, and I'm signing off.